go. Here we go, yo. One time for your mind. You know we ball all day. Yeah. Just know we talk ball all day. Welcome to the full court press. Full court press. We got Danny Thompson on the mic, so just chill with the sound. Ball all day. Yeah. Just know we talk ball all day. Welcome to the full court press.
We are back for hour number 2 of Full Court Press Radio, sponsored by SOFOELC. I'm your host, Danny Thompson, checking in with you tonight here on 96.9 The Game, Orlando's brand new sports leader. I'm with my team of Paul Myers, the editor-in-chief of NBAFCPRadio.com, and Mark Johnson, social media manager and NBA draft expert. Guys, opening night, and the Detroit Pistons are making a statement right now against the Atlanta Hawks, guys. But I mean, it's 94-83. I'm just looking at my screen in amazement right now. But speaking of amazement, we have our good friend Zach Oliver. He is now been promoted to the editor-in-chief of Orlando Pinstripe Post. And for the next 15, 20 minutes, we're talking Orlando Magic. So, Zach, how you doing, my friend?
Not bad, guys. A little hoarse over here, but, we're going to fight through this and have a good segment.
Well, like I said, we want to congratulate Zach on his promotion, to the editor-in-chief of Orlando Pinstripe Post, and check those guys out. I mean, he's been writing there for a while, and they have a great team of staff and writers. But, Zach, I'll start it off. It's opening night tomorrow night here in Orlando. They're playing Washington at Amway early, I think 7:30 tomorrow night. What are your impressions on going into tomorrow night's game for the Magic?
To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what to expect because, they put together a nice preseason. They showed some good signs of improvement on both ends of the floor, but they haven't played as a whole unit yet, which I think is going to be the big issue. They didn't have Elfrid Payton for the last 2 weeks of preseason because of hamstring injury, but he's pretty much healed. He's going to most likely go tomorrow night unless something unforeseen happens. They didn't have Aaron Gordon for a while because of recovery from a broken jaw and then some general soreness. He had some soreness in his surgically repaired left foot, which worried the team, and then he had a bruised right foot that kept him out of the game on Friday night against the Grizzlies. So we haven't seen them play as a whole unit, and they haven't put a full game together against an NBA team. Like their best game was probably against Flamengo in Brazil, which, no disrespect to Flamengo, who's won the Brazilian league the last 3 years.
Right.
But they're not an NBA team, so
No.
it's kind of hard to really gauge how well the Magic are playing when that's the opponent. So, it's going to be interesting. The schedule makers didn't give them any favors to start the season. You get 6 straight games against most likely playoff teams this season, and then you get Philadelphia, and you never know where you can get with Philadelphia. So, they could be looking at 0-6, maybe 0-7 start to the season, which is going to get them in a hole really quickly if that happens.
Exactly. So, real quickly before we can transition any further in this matchup, how do you think Elfrid Payton's going to do against John Wall tomorrow night?
It's a really tough matchup for Elfrid, especially coming off the hamstring injury. So, if Wall plays up tempo like the Wizards have been doing a little bit more of in the preseason, then that's going to be, I think, a bit of an issue for Elfrid, even though he's really established as a defender. But, outside of tomorrow night, you look at who Elfrid's got to guard in the first week. He gets Wall tomorrow night, Westbrook Friday night, Derrick Rose on Sunday, Ty Lawson on Wednesday, potentially Drew Holiday next Tuesday if he plays for the Pelicans, and then Kyle Lowry next Friday.
Jeez.
I mean,
Yeah, he's got tough sledding going.
We talk about the point guard being the best position in the NBA, but that's brutal to start the season.
Definitely, yeah.
Exactly.
So, what players should we be looking for to step up? Me, I can't help but have a draw to Mario. What are you expecting out of him? And if you don't expect much out of him, who do you think is going to step up? Someone like Fournier, maybe, or who do you have?
Yeah, I think that they're going to need Fournier to step up. I mean, he hasn't had the best shooting performance in the preseason, which is a little bit worrisome because he's a really streaky guy.
Right.
But if he can start putting it together, that's going to be big. And, I'm interested to see how much the potential of getting a contract extension is kind of weighing on him. Because, the deadline's next Monday. No, not next Monday. Yeah, next Monday is November 2nd, I believe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
let me ask you a question. What kind of style is Scott Skiles going to use with this group? Is it going to be more up tempo? He's been kind of a rugged, slow down coach, in the past. But this group can kind of get out and run. What is he going to do with this group?
Well, I think it's going to kind of be a little bit of a mix, to be completely honest. They've run a little bit in the preseason, and they've been able to get into their sets a lot easier than they were last year. There's still times when the ball sticks, but that's going to happen in every offense. So if they can continue to get the flow going, and especially having Alfred out there compared to Victor Oladipo handling the ball, who's a 2 guard, and then C.J. Watson, who's best fit as a backup, I think that the offense will be a lot better than it has been. Excuse me. And they're going to push it some. Skiles-led teams have finished in the top, I want to say 16 in pace in all but 4 of his seasons as a coach. So, he has a tendency to really play fast-paced, except for, maybe the last 2 years in Milwaukee when they were just trying to grind out games. That's not what this Magic team is going to do. They're going to play to their strengths, which is going to be defending at a high level and then getting out and run. So, a lot of it's going to be how they do on the fast break, but they also have to be successful in the half court if they want to win games this year.
Interesting. You look at the Magic roster, you look at who they selected, who they kept. What was the one guy you were surprised they kept, and the one guy you surprised they cut in the final days?
I wasn't surprised about anybody that they kept. To be completely honest, I think that they went pretty chalky with it. I mean, I think keeping 14 guys instead of 15 was the best way to go. It gives them a little bit of versatility in case, you lose, say, Tobias Harris goes down for a month or so, and you've got to go get, a swing man or something like that. Having that open roster spot's going to be big. If anything, maybe getting rid of, somebody like a Melvin Edgem, who some people believe, had a good shot of making it as wing depth. But other than that, it was really chalky, and I think that's the best for them because the way that the roster's built, they have so much positional versatility that they can go 2 to 3 deep at pretty much every position with 14 guys. So I think that they're in a good spot heading into the season roster-wise.
Well, let's tie back into what I was asking earlier because I have another guy that I neglected to mention. I'm interested in your thoughts in Andrew Nicholson. So a couple guys, Fournier, Nicholson, and Hezonja. What are you thinking you're going to see out of those guys? Maybe early in the season. It's kind of hard to predict past that, but what do you think you're going to see in the first 10, 15 games?
Well, I'll start with Mario this time. I think for him it's going to be a lot of feeling it out still.
Mm-hmm.
He's continued to talk about it's a completely different game.
Yeah, he said that multiple times. Yeah,
and even up to a week ago when we were asking him, it was the same exact answer. So how he adjusts to that is going to be interesting, and to see if he can continue his improvement on the defensive end, which has been really interesting. I think to see the fact that he's improved as much as he has from day one to now. He still has lapses and teams will still attack him. But Coach Skiles said that, if that happens, they'll pull him out.
Right.
He'll sit down for a couple minutes. He'll learn from his mistake. He'll come in. He'll be better than he was before.
Right. And we've seen a little growth from him in the preseason, actually. So
right.
It's good to see.
And his shot was starting to fall a little bit at the end of the preseason, which I think is going to be big for him.
Now, will Skiles? Do you think will he have a deeper bench with this group, or will he have kind of a short rotation? Like, listen, I'll use maybe 1-2 guys off the bench, and the rest of those guys they'll show us. The uniforms are the nice suits they're wearing. What's the story there?
I think that we could see them go, maybe 10, 11, 12 deep some nights. Shabazz Napier, who the team acquired in the summer from the Heat for a handshake and a hug.
Okay.
Put together a really good preseason.
I was going to say Chipotle, but, handshake and a hug is good enough.
He put together a really good preseason. Jason Smith gives him a little bit more shooting. Maybe the defense falls off with him. But those are probably the two guys at the end of the bench that could potentially get some more run. I think Napier's more likely because of how he's played. Paul was asking me about Andrew Nicholson. It's going to be a struggle for him to get in the rotation. Drew's a great guy. He's really talented offensively, and he's shown willingness to go back into the post like he should. But the defense is still an issue, and the fact that they've got a logjam at the power forward spot ahead of him, you have to play Channing Frye, who's put together a really nice preseason, and his spacing is really important to the team. You have to play Aaron Gordon because you picked him fourth last year.
Right. Yeah, they're kind of log jammed a little bit in that power forward spot.
I mean, and Nicholson's not a guy that you can play at center. Like Jason Smith is a guy you can play at either the 4 or the 5.
Right.
And even if Nicholson could play there, I don't think he would because you've got Dwayne Dedman who
has played well.
And I think this is really a good representation of Dedman. On a Friday night, they were running a dribble handoff. He turned it over, but he was the first guy back on defense, disrupted a layup attempt, and then blocked the shot, and then ran back on offense.
Yeah, he's a hustle guy. As much as I liked Kyle O'Quinn because I thought what he brought was the same thing: energy, defense, rebounding. Dedman's the same or better. A little more talented, a little better timing on shot blocking, and I don't know. I know Danny didn't like the fact that the Magic let O'Quinn walk, but I think with Dedman there, I think it actually worked out okay.
The big difference with Dwayne and Kyle, though, Dwayne's not as polished offensively.
No,
exactly.
No, he's not.
Kyle was a guy that you could run the offense through in the high post some, and he was a pretty good passer for a big man.
Yeah.
So that's the big difference there. But I think Dwayne was probably a little bit better defensively, and he's talked about the game's slowing down for him, and he knows when to pick his spots on when to be really physical and when not to be, which is going to be big because they can't have him in foul trouble too much.
Right.
Especially if you're going to play Channing Frye in that second unit, you need Dedman shot blocking out
Absolutely.
there. So he's going to play a big role off the bench for this team.
Here's a question for you, since we're now talking about who's playing the biggest role. It seems like the team Victor Oladipo has to be the guy. This is his year. Is this the year that everything clicks for Victor? I mean, the second half of the season, I think he was like in the top 5 or top 6 in the Eastern Conference of scoring. I think like 23 a game in the second half of the season. Zach, you're with these guys. Do you think that he turned the corner, especially last season going into this season, that he's going to be that guy, that Dwayne Wade type of player that we're expecting to see from him?
Yeah, I think so. And, the end of last season was really good for him, and he's built on that in the preseason. I would say that he's probably been close to the Magic's best player in the preseason, and what he brings on both ends of the floor is really big. His shooting's improving. He looks a lot more confident driving the ball. He sees the defense a lot better, and he can move the ball, which is huge in this offense because they can swing it right back around to him and get him an easy look. So I think this is his year. He was my pick going into the season to win Most Improved. No bias in that really because I think that he's going to take that big of a step forward.
I mean, I just mentioned earlier, last 26 games of the season, 20 points a game, going on almost 4 rebounds, a little more, about 4.5 assists a game. So, and almost 2 steals a game as well too, going into that second part of the season.
And that's the thing with Victor. He's not just going to impact the game with his scoring or his defense. He can pass the ball some. He rebounds. He'll play passing lanes. He'll block a shot every once in a while. He's a guy that can go give you maybe if you get like 19, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals a game from him, I think you're really happy this season.
Another question: What do the Magic and what do the Magic fans expect out of Tobias Harris this year?
That's a good question. Tobias is really interesting